Look up. See the sheer verticality? The canyons of steel and glass. New York City, the concrete capital of the world. But it wasn't built on concrete. It was built on a lie, a geological deception, and on the audacity of men who dared to dream taller than God. Forget the Dutch founders. Forget the colonial merchants. The true birth of New York happened when men decided to conquer two things: gravity and their own limitless greed. This is the story of how a small island, anchored by unbreakable rock, became the empire of iron and ambition. Before starting the video, I have a small request for all of you. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe and stay with me to watch more videos like this. And if you are watching from Facebook, make sure to follow my Facebook page. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment to share your thoughts, and share it with your friends.
The bedrock of ambition. Manhattan, 1865. The close of the Civil War. The city was a roaring furnace of possibility. While the rest of America struggled with Reconstruction, New York was pivoting from war profiteering to industrial expansion. But the city's destiny was not merely growth, it was vertical ascension. Yet New York faced an existential dilemma: its limited space. The grid plan laid out in 1811 had created an orderly cage of streets and avenues, but the population was exploding. The only direction left to grow was up. This ambition, however, was anchored by one strange, unseen, and completely necessary reality: Manhattan's geological foundation. Beneath the topsoil of the island lay the Manhattan Schist, a metamorphic rock formation dating back nearly 500 million years. The schist, tough and unyielding, was the only reason the city could support the concentrated weight of future skyscrapers. In the mid-19th century, construction was still largely limited by the load-bearing capacity of brick and masonry walls. Buildings of 5 or 6 stories were the norm. Any taller, and the walls at the base had to be impossibly thick, wasting valuable ground floor space. A 9-story building might require ground walls 8 feet thick, a logistical and economic nightmare. Architects dreamed of height, but physics held them captive. The key to escaping this captivity lay not in masonry, but in a humble material that had defined the age of rail and naval power: iron. The pivotal moment arrived not in a grand architect's studio, but in a quiet, devastating fire. The Great Fire of Chicago in 1871 wiped out the city's central business district, but it provided a vital, if tragic, lesson. Brick buildings were brittle. What survived the flames and the heat? Cast iron columns and wrought iron beams. The lesson was not lost on the ambitious builders in New York. If iron could withstand fire, it could certainly carry weight. Enter James Bogardus, a self-taught inventor and architectural pioneer. He wasn't an architect. He was an engineer obsessed with efficiency and prefabrication. He championed the idea of using cast iron facades, structurally sound, fire-resistant, and aesthetically flexible panels manufactured in foundries and bolted onto the building frame. This was not yet the true steel skyscraper, but it was the essential, revolutionary prelude. These cast iron buildings, prevalent in neighborhoods like Soho, south of Houston Street, were astonishing. The elaborate Renaissance and Venetian facades could be replicated cheaply and quickly, but their true genius lay in the structure. The outer walls were now lighter, thinner, and the huge continuous windows allowed light to flood the interior, a critical advantage for the textile and dry goods industries that dominated the district. These buildings, like the surviving Houtwood Building, 1857, were essentially 5 or 6-story boxes of glass held up by elegant ironed columns. It was a factory-made city. The iron skeleton freed the walls from their load-bearing responsibility. Walls became mere curtains, protecting the interior from the elements. This seemingly small shift, from load-bearing masonry to a skeletal frame, was the intellectual and material foundation for the 40-story building. New York had found its material to conquer the atmosphere. But the new heights created a new problem, one of efficiency. How do you get people up there? Part 2. Conquering vertical travel. The limits of human endurance dictated that a staircase was impractical beyond about 6 stories. Beyond that, the upper floors, even with superior light and air, were worthless for commerce. New York's ambition was stalled by the human leg. The solution came from an unlikely source, the fear of falling. Elisha Graves Otis had perfected the safety elevator in the 1550s. His crucial innovation wasn't the lift itself, which had existed in rudimentary forms for centuries, but the automatic brake system. At the 1854 World's Fair, Otis famously stood on his hoisted platform and, using an axe, ordered the single suspension rope to be cut. The platform plummeted a few feet. Then the safety mechanism, a strong spring-loaded ratchet gripping the guide rails, engaged with a terrifying, reassuring clang. Otis bowed to the stunned crowd and declared, "All safe, gentlemen, all safe." This public demonstration, born of showmanship, removed the single greatest psychological barrier to tall building construction, the fear of death. People could now trust they wouldn't plummet from the 10th floor. The introduction of the passenger elevator changed the fundamental economics of the city forever. For the first time, the most valuable real estate in a building was not the ground floor, but the penthouse. No longer was the 5th floor the undesirable attic, it was the prime view. The elevator was the key to unlocking the true value of the Manhattan Schist. The first building to fully commit to this vertical revolution was the Equitable Life Assurance Building, 1870. Located at 120 Broadway, it rose a remarkable 7.5 stories, considered a true skyscraper at the time. More importantly, it was the first office building in the world to be designed and built with passenger elevators as an integral part of its function. It was a statement. The future of commerce was vertical, and New York was going to own it. The race was on. Architects and developers, fueled by Gilded Age fortunes, began to push the boundaries of iron, and soon its successor, steel. Iron, while strong, was brittle and too heavy for truly monumental heights. Steel, made stronger by removing impurities thanks to the Bessemer process, was lighter, more flexible, and could be mass-produced cheaply. In the 1880s, the concept of the steel skeleton was born. The building's weight was no longer distributed through the walls, but through a central steel cage resting squarely on the bedrock. This framework could be erected much faster than traditional masonry, like a three-dimensional chessboard waiting to be filled in. The culmination of this early steel age was a project of almost reckless vanity, the Flatiron Building, 1902. Officially named the Fuller Building, its striking triangular shape was not an artistic choice, but a necessary response to the oddly shaped parcel of land where Broadway and Fifth Avenue converged. The building became an instant cultural icon. Its height, 22 stories or 285 feet, was impressive, but its daring shape, like the prow of a massive ocean liner slicing through the city, was the real spectacle. The construction method was a masterclass in modern engineering, but its very presence caused a scandal. The powerful wind current swirling around its narrow base created a notorious updraft, leading to crowds of male gawkers, known as mashers, attempting to catch a glimpse of ladies' ankles and undergarments as they passed by. The Flatiron was not just architecture, it was a phenomenon, forcing the city to reckon with the cultural and physical impact of its newfound verticality. New York was now irreversibly committed to the empire. The rules had been rewritten. The race to the heavens had just begun, a race powered by the wealth of titans like Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, and Carnegie, and the limitless, arrogant conviction that the sky itself was the only limit. The stage was set for the construction of the empire.
The race to the heavens. The success of the steel-framed skyscrapers, accelerated by the post-war industrial boom, transformed the architectural ambition of New York from a matter of necessity into an obsession. By the 1920s, the battle for the tallest building became a proxy war between America's wealthiest titans, a zero-sum game of ego and capital. This wasn't just about renting office space. It was about staking a claim on the American century. The ultimate confrontation played out between two titans of industry, each betting their fortunes on a steel spike aimed at the celestial limit: Walter Chrysler and John J. Raskob. The Chrysler Building: vanity and artistry. Walter Chrysler, the automotive magnate, wanted a monument to himself and the machine age he helped create. He was aiming for a world record with his skyscraper at 42nd Street and Lexington Avenue. His architect, William Van Allen, designed a tower that was less a building and more a piece of functional jewelry, a gleaming Art Deco masterpiece designed to dazzle. The problem? They faced stiff competition from the Bank of Manhattan Trust Building, which was rising simultaneously downtown. As the Chrysler Building's steel structure topped out at 1,046 feet, the Bank of Manhattan announced its height at 1,046 feet, a precise, humiliating tie. However, Chrysler had an ace up his sleeve, a secret kept hidden from the public and his competitors until the last possible moment. Van Allen had designed a stainless steel spire, a gleaming needle made of Narusta steel, and had assembled it in sections inside the building's crown. In October 1929, just as the Bank of Manhattan was celebrating its temporary victory, the 125-foot spire was dramatically hoisted through the top of the crown, silently ascending until it rested at the apex like a sword unsheathed. The total height? 1,047 feet. The Chrysler Building was, for a few months, the tallest building in the world. It was a perfect piece of theatrical architecture, an expression of pure, boastful ambition built right before the stock market crashed. The spire, with its famous gargoyles modeled after Chrysler hood ornaments, was a dazzling, unapologetic declaration that New York was the capital of modernity. The Empire State, the ultimate vengeance. Chrysler's victory was short-lived. The real behemoth, a project fueled by the sheer audacity of General Motors executive John J. Raskob, was already in the works. Raskob's motivation was simple, as legend has it. He famously asked his architect, "Can you make it taller than the Chrysler Building?" Raskob's project was the Empire State Building. Located just a few blocks south, the Empire State was an exercise in brutal, organized efficiency, designed by the firm Shreve, Lamb & Harmon. It needed to be not only taller, but unquestionably taller. They would not be snuck up on by a hidden spire. The speed of construction was unprecedented. Working 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, the nearly 3,400 workers, the famous Sky Boys, many of them Native American Mohawk ironworkers known for their fearless footing, erected the entire 1,250-foot tower in a record 410 days. They laid the steel at a rate of 4.5 stories per week. It was a factory for height. The Empire State Building's true height was finalized with a last-minute addition, a massive Zeppelin mooring mast, the 200-foot antenna. Raskob claimed it was a functional docking station for airships, but everyone knew the real function: bragging rights. The final height, mast included, was an awe-inspiring 1,250 feet. It opened on May 1, 1931, solidifying New York's reputation as the architectural master of the world. It was a symbol of hope and American can-do spirit, rising defiantly over the economic catastrophe of the Great Depression. The cost of the Empire State. The triumph of the Empire State Building masked a tragic irony. It was so tall and the depression was so severe that its immediate financial return was non-existent. It became known as the Empty State Building, as only 23% of its offices were initially leased. In 1933, the building's operating costs were sometimes covered only by the revenue generated from its observation decks. People paid to see the symbol of the ambition they could no longer afford. The height wars had created a skyline that shouted global dominance, but the buildings themselves were monuments to the speculative risk that had bankrupted a nation. The city, having mastered the art of vertical building through iron and steel, now had to reckon with the consequences of its unbound ambition. Architecture had evolved from a technological innovation, the iron frame, to a cultural imperative, the Art Deco aesthetic, and finally to an economic symbol, a statement about wealth, power, and the terrifying, empty verticality of the American dream. The city's architecture story wouldn't end there. The second half of the 20th century would usher in the age of glass, minimalism, and global finance. But the audacious, competitive spirit of the Chrysler and Empire State era cemented New York's identity forever.